onto the manager.
Let's stay in London, shall we, and focus on the world champions, of course. A rough couple of weeks for Chelsea. A lot of talk about the way Enzo Maresco has not only treated Raheem Sterling, but also, of course, the way that he talked about him in the press conference earlier this week. Great stuff from Mark Ogden and Nadim Manua. Of course, Nadim knows all about being ostracised at a club. This is what he had to say with Mark.
So, Raheem Sterling's got 2 years left in a contract, reportedly worth £300,000 a week. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Why didn't he just take a pay cut and go to Fulham or to Brentford and play for 50 grand a week? You know, he wants to play.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, actually. Firstly, because as a sort of like as a player or as somebody who's earning any particular type of money, firstly, do you have to take a pay cut? You love football, but do you have to take a pay cut? Because essentially Chelsea have, if we're talking about Raheem Sterling as an example, obviously we could talk about Disassi and so on. If Chelsea said that this is how much they can afford to pay you as a player, then that's essentially what your value is as a player. Okay, well, fine. Well, we can't afford to pay that anymore. You need to go elsewhere. How many teams immediately have a big interest in terms of, say, trying to bring in Raheem Sterling? They'll probably say, well, it's too expensive. So does Raheem Sterling have to go around the club saying, listen, don't worry about how much that costs now. I'm going to come in for less. I'm going to come in for less. At a point where Sterling is probably approaching the point in his career where earnings are potentially maximised as opposed to going the other way. Okay. I think for me, the bigger topic, which goes beyond the money itself, because nobody knows how much he wants, how much he expects, how much he needs, and so on, is the fact that, like, especially as you get older, the decisions you make about where you play a lot of the times are dictated by external factors like family, for example. Mm. Like, where are you going to find the most happiness for yourself as a player? Because you could say, oh, I'll take a tenth of my salary and just go and play anywhere in particular. Like, well, listen, we all love football, but the more you play, the more you realize how much of a job it is, especially with the bad experiences that sometimes come with it. So yes, it's not that simple. And I think the clubs themselves don't necessarily make it that simple either. He will want to play, but he'll want to play at the right place because he's currently at the lowest point he's had in his career to date. So why should he pursue something if he knows that isn't, or if he believes that that's not necessarily going to make him any happier either?
Speaking on the football reporters, Naden with Oggy, there were reports that he could have gone to Bayern Munich, that he could have linked up with Vincent Kompany again, but he didn't want to move his family to Germany. He didn't want that to affect his family life.
I get that.
And that is something that, as a former pro, that you can't criticise, that you can't say, well, look, you're still playing at the highest level. No, you still have the opportunity.
No, I mean, that's for families to make decisions. The one thing that I would say, I'm presuming, this was some sort of loan deal to Bayern Munich. You know, you can get round that by going yourself and making the travel back and forward. I mean, no man travels more than the guy sat next to me. I mean, doesn't go...
But unfortunately, Shaka goes in the car to avoid his family.
I'm down to Boston for about 15 years. But, you know, you can't... But that's a personal matter. The fact that he was getting a chance, along with Nico Jackson, to move to Bayern is a shocker. There is no right and wrong answer here. There is not. Because Chelsea have given the player the contract, the manager doesn't want him, the player is entitled to stay and pick up his wages. It then comes down to personal decisions, you know, when you're not wanted at a club. So they're not moving a family abroad. I mean, if you're saying you didn't want to move 2 hours, then that's different. But when you're moving, not everybody wants to move to a different country, because it could be a schooling issue or something like that. And so these things are personal, and there is no right and wrong answer here. Raheem Sterling and Chelsea and everybody around it are going to have to figure this one out.
I think for so long there's been an expectation that you just play for as long as you can, regardless.
Right. Yeah.
If it means taking a pay cut, then so be it. But the money has grown to a point now where I think players coming to the end of their careers, they're able to dictate a lot more of that. Now, Raheem Sterling will be 31 in December. So by usual measure, it's not really considered retirement age. But if he's at a point where he feels he's earned enough and he can sustain his family throughout, he's no longer in love with the game as he once was 6 or 7 years ago, his family is settled in London, then why move? And I think that's when this happens to every single player with a family as you come to the end of your career. what do you do? Where do you put down those roots? Because for the duration of your career, your family are moving around with you while you chase your dreams. And at some point, you're going to have to be a father and put them first. And I think that's what Raheem Sterling is doing. That maybe he just sees this career going until the next 2 years to the end of his contract, and he's going to pack up and let his family put down their roots there, let those kids have as normal a childhood or what's left of their childhoods as possible. And that's a responsible fathering thing to do.
Right.
Rather than, and he's putting that first as opposed to, well, I want one last hurrah. That, you know, at some point you run out of
It's really interesting because I think as someone who's never played the game, like we're like, wow, you've got the best job in the world. Mm-hmm. You know, you should be able to, you should play it to the best as you can for as long as you can. But as you say, and I think speaking to you guys over the years, you do realise there's that personal element to it. That just because in theory you've won the lottery or whatever to be able to play this game at the highest level doesn't mean that then it should be dictated to you how you should live.
I'll give you. Sorry, Shaq. I'll give you an example. It's a little different because it wasn't about a player frozen out, but it was about moving countries. And you kind of know this story. My old Celtic and Scotland teammate Paul Lambert, former Villa manager in Norwich, blah blah blah. He was playing at Borussia Dortmund in Germany, and they just won the Champions League, and I'm beating Juventus with a magnificent Dortmund team. And 3 months after winning the Champions League, he moved to Celtic and joined us. Because I think he had three or four young kids at the time, and I think it was... And Celtic's a big club, obviously, huge club, so are Dortmund. But Celtic are not winning the Champions League, it's not even close. You know, you've got Borussia Dortmund going for the Bundesliga, going for the best trophy you can win as a player in club football, and yet here he is jumping from that ship with much better players, a much more successful club, certainly in Europe, to come back to Scotland, when most people would sit and think, why would you leave that situation? And it was because, I think, behind the scenes, they wanted to return to somewhere where everybody was a bit more comfortable. And I think, ultimately, every player that plays the game has to make, wherever they move, whatever club they go to in whatever country, has to factor that in. And when people say players moving sometimes, they think it's just for the money, or they think it's just for that, or just for this, or just for the glory. But it's not. It's not. There are so many other facets to it that go on behind the scenes. And, you know, the Raheem Sterling one, the Paul Lambert one, there's thousands of them. There's absolutely thousands of them. And sometimes you don't realise why players make decisions. Their head scratches, you're looking, why is he going there? Why is he going there? And usually there's something else beyond the money and beyond what's happening on the field. And it's usually what's happening at home.
Ian, who would have thought? Footballers are people too, eh?
Well, I mean, I understand what the guys are saying about family considerations, things we don't know about because we're on the outside of all that. But I think, I mean, what you said, Dan, is probably right. There is a bit of a perception now of Sterling that he has had a great career, but he's something of a light of former days. And then you hear he did have the chance maybe to go to Bayern Munich. That would have been an interesting move. Okay, might not have worked with his family life, but has he lost a bit of fire and desire to be a top professional footballer when he's only just past his 30th birthday, coming on 31, isn't he? So I think that there is that, but, you know, you're right. We don't understand all of the circumstances around this, but it does seem a pity, doesn't it, that Raheem Sterling is just sitting around on a Saturday afternoon or whenever the games are now, rather than starring and making headlines.
Just one thing quickly. I'm not sure if you saw Stevie during the week. Got quite animated when Enzo Maresco brought up the fact that his dad was a fisherman and then that he had to get up at 2 a.m. and worked hard in the mornings. And that's real graft. You know, I feel sorry for people like that who have to kind of go out and earn a living like that. I've got no sympathy for Raheem Sterling. Stevie's point was, what's that got to do with anything? Why bring that up? You know, Enzo Maresco came out and said, I've been isolated myself. I know what it's like. So why treat Raheem Sterling as you were treated and didn't like in the first place?
I mean, I'm not quite sure what we're getting at here.
So Maresco,
I know what he's saying.
Maresco says, why are we talking about Sterling so much? This is a guy who earns 300 grand a week. Why is he even a conversation? Why is there any sympathy for him? Look at my dad. He went out 2 a.m. as a fisherman, really grafted. Yeah. And Stevie's point is, it's apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Well, it is, because it's two completely different things. I mean, there's been people down coal mines for years, you know, there's people grafted away and all sorts of different stuff and come out with absolutely diddly squat at the end of it. You know, we're talking about this in a football parlance. Listen, I don't think anybody here is sitting shedding a tear for Raheem Sterling. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's a situation for him. And look, the manager doesn't like... I'm not saying he doesn't like him. He doesn't like him as a player. Whether he likes him as a person, I don't know. But it's crystal clear he doesn't like him as a player. And that's his choice. That is Maresca's choice. But yeah, you're right. You don't have to start making reference to people getting up at this time and getting up at that time. I'm sure from Raheem Sterling's point of view, even if he's lost a bit of desire, as Ian said, and I would tend to agree with that, you know, you don't want to sit there and just see your career fall flat on its face. You want to be able to go out and at least do something in a weekend. There has to be a purpose, surely, for you training every day. And you will still be training. There has to be something at the end of the week, Shaq, to go and do, to play.
There's a couple of things. I was on the show with Stevie earlier in the week when he made those comments, and I freely admit, I hold my hands up. I didn't realise that Maresca was asking Sterling to come in at 8 o'clock at night. I knew he was asking him to train.
Sorry?
He's asking Raheem Sterling and one other, I can't remember who it is, to come in at 8 o'clock at night to train separately for the team. Now, coming in to train...
That's trying to drive somebody into...
Exactly. Coming in to train separately is nothing new. Yes. Coming in to train separately at 8 o'clock at night is desperate. So to that point, and to build on what Stevie was saying, no, I don't understand the comparison with your father. Raheem Sterling is paid the amount of money he is because he has a very specialised skill set and is rewarded accordingly. Make what you like of that. He's rewarded because of this very specialised skill set. Now, he may be surplus to your requirements right now, but that doesn't mean that you treat him any less, that you demean him in any way, that you belittle him in any way. And this, for me, is a dangerous double-edged sword for Maresca, because the rest of the dressing room, whether they're playing or not, are seeing this. And every single player will go through this period in their life, whether it's under Maresca and at Chelsea or not. But every single player comes to the end of their time, and where they are kind of trying to balance being in the team and not, and because you've been in the game for so long, you're in it at a certain level. And players lose respect for that treatment. Players will lose respect for Maresca very quickly. So while he thinks that the brave thing to say or the big thing to say is to just diminish Raheem Sterling as he is and make comparisons for God alone knows what reasons, he has to be very careful in how the rest of the dressing room hears this and how they process this, because they could turn on him very quickly if they so desire.
This smells to me like it might be coming from Maresca and it may be coming down from above, from boardroom level. But
Maresca has to be the go-between. He has to take that responsibility. What I'm saying is, it seems
to me, and I've had this experience, it comes down, let's try and destroy him, let's try and just drive him into the ground so his chin's on the floor, so he'll take the first thing that comes along.
So he gives up the money, basically.
He just gives up. And I don't know Raheem Sterling, right? But I don't think any player at any level should have that. And I have had, as you know, something similar, where a manager and a club will try to drive me into the ground, try to drive me out when I wasn't allowed to park in the club car park, when I wasn't allowed to get on the bus, when I wasn't allowed to get into the training ground. Tried everything mentally to get in my head. And as you know, that's difficult. And I stood my ground. And I think any player should stand their ground when a club are trying to physically force a player out with mental destruction. And as we know, nobody comes in at that time of night to train. Absolutely nobody. Because that's the time at night you're at home.
Sure, of course.
And that's the time... So if Chelsea are doing that, this is classless. Absolutely classless. I understand ostracising a player, any player. That can happen. But when you're treating a player and you're an elite-level club with a global audience and you have made a decision to spend money on this player and give him a contract, and then you're trying to mentally destroy him by bringing him in the evening, that is bang out of order.